PHA's 1. No one's crazy context. Housel opens by establishing that people's financial decisions, no matter how irrational they seem, make perfect sense given their unique life experiences. Everyone is shaped by a different economic reality. Insight 111. Your personal history shapes your financial DNA. Trigger. Housel examines how people born during the Great Depression, the post-war boom, and the inflation of the 1970s all developed radically different attitudes toward spending, saving, and investing, despite living in the same country. Realization. No one is crazy with money. Every financial decision is rooted in the unique set of experiences a person has lived through. A person who grew up in poverty and a person who grew up wealthy are essentially playing different games. Intermediate conclusion. Before judging anyone's financial behavior, including your own, understand the mental model that produced it. Your personal experiences with money makeup may be 0 being 0, 0 being 0, 1% of what's happened in the world, but maybe 80% of how you think the world works. Insight 1-2. The lottery ticket paradox. Trigger. Housel presents data showing that the lowest income households spend disproportionately more on lottery tickets than wealthy households. Economists call this irrational. Realization. For someone who has never had a realistic path to wealth through savings or investment, the lottery is the only financial product that offers a dream of transformation. It is not irrational. It is the only option that feels real from inside their experience. Intermediate conclusion. Financial advice that ignores emotional context is useless. What looks foolish from the outside may be the only rational move from inside someone's lived reality. PHAC 2. Luck and risk. The identical twins context. Housel explores why we over-attribute financial success to skill and financial failure to poor decisions, when both luck and risk play enormous roles. Insight 2.1. Bill Gates and the 1 in a million school. Trigger. Bill Gates attended Lakeside School, one of the only high schools in the world with a computer terminal in the late 1960s. His classmate, Kent Evans, was equally brilliant and ambitious, but died in a mountaineering accident before graduating. Realization. Success is never entirely the result of individual effort. Luck, being at the right school, and risk and untimely death are two sides of the same coin. You cannot believe in one without respecting the other. Intermediate conclusion. When things go well, be humble. When things go badly, be forgiving. Not all success is due to hard work, and not all failure is due to laziness. Luck and risk are both the reality that every outcome in life is guided by forces other than individual effort. Insight 222. The danger of studying extremes. Trigger. Housel observes that business books obsessively study billionaires and spectacular failures, ignoring the vast middle ground where most useful lessons live. Realization. Extreme outcomes are driven disproportionately by luck and risk, making them unreliable role models. The more extreme the outcome, the less applicable its lessons are to ordinary life. Intermediate conclusion. Study broad patterns, not outliers. Focus less on specific individuals and more on common behaviors that tend to work across many situations. PHA's 3. Never enough context. Housel examines why even wealthy people destroy themselves by always wanting more. The failure to recognize enough. Insight 3.1. The Billionaire's Trap. Trigger. Rajat Gupta, former CEO of McKinsey and already extraordinarily wealthy, risked everything through insider trading to try to reach the next level. Bernie Madoff did the same from an already privileged position. Both had more than enough and lost it all. Chasing more. Realization. The hardest financial skill is getting the goalpost to stop moving. When ambition has no ceiling, risk has no floor. There is no amount of money that will satisfy someone who doesn't know what enough looks like. Intermediate conclusion. Define enough. Before the pursuit of more consumes what you already have, there is no reason to risk what you have and need for what you don't have and don't need. Insight 3.2. Social comparison is the enemy. Trigger. Housel describes the endless ladder where every income level feels poor compared to the one above it. No matter how much you earn, someone in your circle earns more. Realization. The ceiling of social comparison is effectively infinite. Using other people as the benchmark for enough is a game that cannot be won. Intermediate conclusion. The only way to win the money game is to stop comparing. Measure wealth against your own needs, not others' lifestyles. Pause. Phase 4. Confounding. Compounding context. Housel reveals why the most powerful force in finance, compounding, is deeply counterintuitive and consistently underestimated. Insight 421. Warren Buffett's real secret, trigger. The vast majority of Warren Buffett's net worth was accumulated after his 50th birthday. He started investing as a child and never stopped. Most people focus on his investment skill, missing the more important variable. Realization. Buffett's skill is investing, but his secret is time. Compounding doesn't work in a linear way that human brains can intuitively grasp. It is exponential, and the real gains come at the very end of the curve. Intermediate conclusion. The most important variable in building wealth is not returns, it's time. Start early and don't interrupt the compounding unnecessarily. His skill is investing, but his secret is time. Insight 4.2. Ice Ages and Linear Thinking. Trigger. Housel explains how ice ages are not caused by dramatically cold winters, but by summers that are just cool enough not to melt the previous winter's snow. Tiny, repeated effects compound over thousands of years into mile-thick glaciers. Realization. Humans default to linear thinking. We cannot intuitively feel how small, consistent actions compound into extraordinary outcomes. This blindness to compounding applies to saving, investing, learning, and nearly every domain of life. Intermediate conclusion. Respect the small and consistent over the big and dramatic. The boring strategy you maintain for decades will beat the exciting strategy you abandon after a year. PHAs 5. Getting wealthy versus staying. Wealthy context. Housel draws a sharp distinction between the skills needed to make money and the skills needed to keep it, and argues they are almost opposites. Insight 5.1. Survival is the only strategy. Trigger. Housel contrasts Jesse Livermore, who made a fortune shorting the 1929 crash and then lost everything, with ordinary people who simply stayed in the market through every crisis and came out ahead. Realization. Getting money requires optimism, risk-taking, and putting yourself out there. Keeping money requires the opposite: humility, fear, and the acceptance that some of what you've gained is due to luck. The two mindsets are in tension, and most people master only one. Intermediate conclusion. Plan not for the best case, but for survival. A plan that works in most scenarios but fails catastrophically in rare ones is a bad plan. More than I want big returns, I want to be financially unbreakable. And if I'm unbreakable, I actually think I'll get the biggest returns, because I'll be able to stick around long enough for compounding to work wonders. Insight 5.2. Room for error. Trigger. Housel observes that many smart investors build financial plans with zero margin for error. Every dollar is optimally allocated. Every return is projected precisely. Then, reality intervenes. Realization. The most important part of any financial plan is planning for the plan not going according to plan. The gap between what could happen and what you need to happen to survive is what allows you to endure. Intermediate conclusion. Always build in a buffer. Save more than you think you need. Avoid single points of failure. The ability to endure bad luck is more valuable than the ability to capitalize on good luck. Pass she. 6 tails, you win context. Housel reveals that in business and investing, a tiny number of events drive the vast majority of outcomes, and this changes everything about how to think about failure. Insight 61. The venture capital model of life. Trigger. Housel examines venture capital, The vast majority of investments lose money, yet the industry thrives because a tiny fraction of bets produce returns so large they more than compensate for everything else. The same pattern holds in public markets. A handful of stocks drive virtually all long-term gains. Realization: you can be wrong most of the time and still end up enormously successful, as long as the few things you get right are big enough. The tails: extreme positive outcomes drive everything. Intermediate conclusion: don't aim for perfection. Aim for staying in the game long enough for your few big wins to compensate for many small losses. This applies to investing, career decisions, and creative work. You can be wrong half the time and still make a fortune. Insight 622: art dealers and the hidden failure rate. Trigger: Heinz Berggruen, one of the most successful art dealers in history, bought huge quantities of art. Most of it was unremarkable. A few masterpieces made his entire fortune and reputation. Realization: in any field driven by tail events, the winning strategy is volume and patience, not precision. Success doesn't require knowing which specific bet will pay off. It requires making enough bets and surviving long enough to find out. Intermediate conclusion: accept a high failure rate. The cost of many small failures is trivial compared to the reward of one enormous success. PHAC 7. Freedom. The highest dividend context. Housel argues that the true value of money has nothing to do with material goods, and that most people optimize for the wrong thing. Insight 7.1. The highest form of wealth is control over your time. Trigger: Housel cites research showing that the strongest predictor of happiness is not income, possessions, or status. It is having control over one's daily life. What to do, when to do it, with whom. Realization: the ability to do what you want, when you want, with whom you want, for as long as you want. That is the ultimate dividend that money pays. Everything else is a side effect. Intermediate conclusion: optimize financial decisions for autonomy and flexibility, not for maximum return or maximum spending. The highest form of wealth is the ability to wake up every morning and say, I can do whatever I want today. Insight 722. The paradox of the successful career. Trigger: Housel describes ambitious people who pursue high-income careers, only to find that the careers control them completely. Endless hours, no flexibility, golden handcuffs. They traded their time for money, then couldn't buy the time back. Realization: using money to buy things while surrendering control over your time is a losing trade. A person with moderate income and full control over their schedule is wealthier in a meaningful sense than a person with high income and no freedom. Intermediate conclusion: when making career and financial decisions, weight freedom more heavily than income. The person who has enough and owns their time has won. PHAC 8. Wealth is what you don't see context. Housel challenges the assumption that visible wealth equals real wealth and reveals the paradox of admiration through possessions. Insight 8.1. The man in the car. Trigger: Housel recalls seeing people in expensive cars and realizing he never thought the driver of that car is cool. Instead, he thought, if I had that car, people would think I'm cool. The admiration never goes to the owner. People use the object as a prop for their own fantasies. Realization: people buy expensive things thinking it will earn them respect and admiration. But onlookers don't admire the owner. They imagine themselves in the owner's position. The admiration you seek almost never arrives. Intermediate conclusion: if your goal is respect and admiration, humility, kindness, and empathy will get you more of it than any luxury purchase ever will. No one is impressed with your possessions as much as you are. Insight 8.2. Rich versus Zekton. Wealthy. Trigger: Housel points out that when we see someone with an expensive car, we know one thing: they have less money than before they bought it. We see spending, not wealth. The truly wealthy are often invisible because their wealth is in what they chose not to buy. Realization: wealth is the money not spent, the cars not bought, the upgrades declined, the luxuries passed on. True wealth is financial assets that haven't yet been converted into visible stuff. Rich is a current income. Wealthy is what's accumulated. Intermediate conclusion. The only way to build wealth is to not spend money. This sounds trivially simple, but the entire consumer economy is designed to prevent you from doing exactly this. Wealth is the nice cars not purchased, the diamonds not bought, the renovations postponed. Wealth is financial assets that haven't yet been converted into the stuff you see. Pashtas. 9. Save money. No reason needed context. Housel argues for saving not as a means to a specific goal, but as a default behavior that creates something more valuable than any planned purchase. Optionality. Insight 9.1. Saving is the gap between ego and income. Trigger. Housel observes that past a certain level of income, saving is determined not by how much you earn, but by how much of your ego you can suppress. High earners with high lifestyle inflation save nothing. Moderate earners with modest lives accumulate steadily. Realization. Building wealth has little to do with your income or investment returns, and everything to do with your savings rate. And your savings rate is driven by your ability to keep lifestyle expectations below what you can afford. Intermediate conclusion. You don't need a specific reason to save. Save for the unknown, for optionality, for the ability to respond to opportunities and survive crises you can't yet imagine. The value of wealth is relative to what you need. Past a certain level of income, what you need is just what sits below your ego. Insight 9.2. Flexibility is the hidden return trigger. Housel notes that investment returns can be calculated, but the return on flexibility, the ability to wait for the right opportunity, to quit a bad job, to handle an emergency, cannot be measured yet, may be the highest return of all. Realization. Every dollar saved gives you a piece of the future that you control. Savings without a specific purpose give you options, and options in an unpredictable world are enormously valuable. Intermediate conclusion. Don't only save for retirement or a house. Save for the ability to navigate a world that will surprise you. PHAs 10. Reasonable parts. Rational context. Housel argues that the optimal financial strategy is useless if you can't stick with it emotionally, and makes the case for being human, not a spreadsheet. Insight 10.1. The fever that helps. Trigger. Housel describes how a mild fever actually helps fight infection, yet we take medication to reduce it because the discomfort feels unbearable. Medically suboptimal, but emotionally reasonable. Finance works the same way. Realization. The mathematically optimal strategy is irrelevant if it causes so much anxiety that you abandon it. A slightly worse strategy that you can actually maintain through fear, uncertainty, and market panics will outperform the best strategy that you quit at the worst moment. Intermediate conclusion. Aim to be reasonable, not rational. If holding some bonds or keeping extra cash helps you sleep at night, the peace of mind is itself a return, because it keeps you in the game. Aiming to be mostly reasonable works better than trying to be coldly rational. Plach. Plach 5's 11. Surprise. The nature of history. Context. Housel examines why we are perpetually shocked by events we should expect. Unprecedented things happen all the time, and the biggest ones are always the ones nobody saw coming. Insight 11.1. History is the study of surprises. Trigger. Housel lists the major economic events of the past century: the Great Depression, World War II, the post-war boom, the Internet revolution, the 2008 financial crisis, and notes that none were predicted by mainstream thought. Realization. The most impactful events in economic history were, by definition, unprecedented. Using the past to predict the specific shape of the future is a fool's errand. What you can predict is that surprises will happen. You just can't know their shape. Intermediate conclusion. Build a financial life that can withstand surprises rather than one that depends on a specific prediction being correct. Robustness beats optimization. The correct lesson to learn from surprises is that the world is surprising. PHACE 12. The Seduction of Pessimism. Context: Housel explores why pessimism sounds smarter and more credible than optimism, even though optimists have historically been more correct about the long arc of progress. Insight 12.1.1. Pessimism sells because loss hurts more. Trigger. Housel notes that financial media coverage of crashes gets dramatically more attention than coverage of booms. A sudden drop makes headlines everywhere. A steady multi-year gain goes largely unnoticed. Realization. Pessimism is seductive because losses hurt more than equivalent gains feel good. Additionally, pessimists sound intellectually rigorous, while optimists sound naive. This creates a permanent bias in public discourse toward doom. Intermediate conclusion. Be aware of the asymmetry. Rational optimism. Believing that things tend to improve while knowing the path is bumpy is the correct historical bet. Optimism sounds like a sales pitch. Pessimism sounds like someone trying to help you. Insight 12.2. Growth happens slowly, destruction happens fast. Trigger. Housel contrasts how quickly markets crash versus how slowly they recover. Construction takes years, demolition takes hours. This asymmetry of time is true across nearly every domain. Realization? Destruction is noticeable because it's sudden and dramatic. Growth is invisible because it's gradual and quiet. This makes pessimism feel more urgent and real-time relevant, while progress is always easy to overlook. Intermediate conclusion. Judge financial progress over decades, not days. The person who checks their portfolio daily will feel anxious. The person who checks yearly will feel wealthy. Zoom out. Tanser, PHACE 14. When you'll believe anything. Stories over statistics. Context: Housel closes by examining the most dangerous force in finance, the stories we tell ourselves, and how narratives override data when we want something badly enough. Insight 13.1. The power of the story. You tell yourself. Trigger. Housel examines the dot-com bubble and the 2008 housing crisis. In both cases, the math was available, the warnings were published, but people chose to believe a story that felt good instead of data that didn't. Realization. The more you want something to be true, the more likely you are to believe a story that overestimates the odds of it being true. We are not data processing machines. We are storytelling creatures who use data selectively to support our preferred narrative. Intermediate conclusion. Be aware of your own narrative. When you find yourself believing that this time is different, that a particular investment is a sure thing, or that the rules don't apply to you, that's the moment to pause and question. The more you want something to be true, the more likely you are to believe a story that overestimates the odds of it being true. Insight 13.2. Everyone has an incomplete picture. Trigger. Housel describes how even the most informed investors, economists, and central bankers work with incomplete information and fill the gaps with confident-sounding stories. Realization: no one fully understands the economy, the market, or the future. Everyone is making their best guess, then wrapping it in a confident narrative. The difference between amateurs and experts is not certainty, it's awareness of uncertainty. Intermediate conclusion. Humility is the most underrated financial skill. Acknowledge what you don't know, build plans that don't require omniscience, and be comfortable with uncertainty. Nassen sin humility as a prerequisite for allwesit for ensjudiver, the fundamental mentalisheth. The fundamentalish requisite, the fundamental mechanism of wealth creation that humans chronically underestimate. Level 2. Operational principles, defining of wealth. Nas the structural protection against an unpredictable. Naskin money requires different skills than getting a reason. The daily practice that enables compounding. Be reasonable, not rational. The behavioral principle that keeps you in the game. Build room for error. The structural protection against an unpredictable world. Level 3. Management principles. Survival optimizing, keeping money. Accept a high failure rate. Strategic principles. Fresh money. No individual start picks. No market timing. The goal is independence, not maximum returns. Time in the market versus timing the market. A person who invests consistently, even at market peaks, outperforms a person who waits for perfect entry points, simply because staying invested captures compounding. The power of good enough. By following a reasonable, not optimal strategy and never abandoning it, average investors have historically outperformed brilliant investors who couldn't control their behavior. Key lessons for application. 1. Accept that your financial worldview is shaped by your unique experience, and so is everyone else's. Stop judging, start understanding. 2. Acknowledge the role of luck and risk. Be humble in success and compassionate in failure. 3. Define your enough. The most liberating financial decision is knowing when to stop chasing more. 4. Respect compounding. Start early, stay consistent, and never interrupt it unnecessarily. Time is the secret ingredient. 5. Prioritize survival over optimization. The best investment strategy is one you can maintain through every crisis. 6. Build room for error into everything. Save more, diversify more, and plan for the plan not working. 7. Optimize for freedom, not income. Control over your time is the highest form of wealth. 8. Wealth is what you don't spend. The gap between what you earn and what you spend is the only thing that builds wealth. 9. Be reasonable, not rational. A strategy you can stick with beats a perfect strategy you'll abandon. 10. Expect surprises. The world will always produce events no one predicted. Build a financial life that can absorb them. 11. Resist the seduction of pessimism. Growth is slow and quiet. Destruction is fast and loud. Don't confuse visibility with probability. 12. Watch the stories you tell yourself. The most dangerous financial risk is the narrative you've constructed to justify what you already want to believe.